I'll try and give you the way that we look at this. So I do simple experiments with human beings, and the basic experiment we did to look at this question is the following. Imagine you were in the experiment. I would give you a sheet of paper with 20 math problems that each of you could solve if you had enough time. I would pass it along. I would say you have 5 minutes, solve as many of those as you can. I'll give you $1 per question. You would go ahead, you would work as fast as you can. When the 5 minutes are over, I would say, please stop, put your pencil down, and count how many questions you got correctly. Now that you know how many questions you got correctly, please go to the back of the room and shred your piece of paper. And now come back to the front and tell me how many questions you got correctly. Most people do this. They come and they say, we solved 6 problems. They get paid $6. What the people in our experiments usually don't know, actually they never know, is that the shredder has been fixed. So the shredder only shreds the sides of the page, but the main body of the page remains intact. I can jump inside and I can find out how many questions they really solved correctly. What do we find? Vast majority of the people solve 4 problems and reporting to be solving 6. Now, we've run this experiment on about 30,000 people so far. And from these 30,000 people, we found 12 that were big cheaters. Right? And we lost about $150 to them. We found 18,000 people who were little cheaters, and we lost 36,000 to them. And I think this is actually a good comparison, right? There are some big cheaters out there, but are incredibly few. And there's a tremendous amount of little cheaters. But because there's so many of them and things are so frequent, the financial devastation of that second activity is much higher. Now, how do we think about this dishonesty? There's lots of factors that get our ability to cheat more and our ability to cheat right can fluctuate, but I want to tell you 2 kind of mechanisms that they change that. The first one, I'll tell you a little joke. Johnny comes home from the school with a note from the teacher that said that little Johnny stole a pencil from the kid who's sitting next to him. And Johnny's father is furious, and he says, Johnny, I'm embarrassed and humiliated. You never, never, never steal a pencil from the kid who's sitting next to you. You're grounded for 3 weeks and just wait until your mother comes. And besides, Johnny, if you need a pencil, you know very well you could just say something. You could just mention it, you can point it out, you can ask me, and I can bring you dozens of pencils from work. Now, why is this amusing, or a little bit amusing? I think because we all recognize that taking a pencil from work is something we can easily justify, versus taking 10 cents from a petty cash box. Even if we just took it and went ahead and bought a pencil, would feel very differently to us. So we ran our experiment this way. We ran the same experiment with the simple math problems, but we had 2 conditions. In one of them, you came to the experiment and you say, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems, give me X dollars. In the second one, you would come and you would say, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems, give me X tokens. And we paid people with pieces of plastic. People took these pieces of plastic, walked 12 feet to the side, and changed them for dollars. So when somebody was looking into the eyes of the experiment, they were cheating not for money. They were cheating for something that was 1 step removed from money. What happened in our experiments? People doubled their cheating. Right? This, by the way, is one of the most worrisome experiments I think we've ever conducted, because if you think that being 1 step removed from cash relieves people from the moral shackles, what about stock options? Mortgage-backed securities. Think about all kinds of things that has many, many steps in them. Could it be that in those cases, human ability is quite fantastic in both acting dishonestly but rationalizing things quite quickly to ourselves? That's the first kind of point I want to point out, is that dishonesty in the way we find it is a lot about rationalization. And what helps us rationalize something increases dishonesty, and when it's harder to rationalize something, it decreases dishonesty. Here's another little story. I'll give you the Jewish version. A guy goes to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, you wouldn't believe what happened. Somebody stole my bicycle from synagogue. The rabbi is appalled. Somebody stealing your bike from synagogue? How could this happen? He said, come next week to synagogue back and sit in the front row. And as we go over the 10 Commandments, turn around and look at everybody in the eyes. And when we get to thou shalt not steal, see who can't look you in the eyes, that's your criminal. The guy comes back the next week, sit in the front row, turns around, look at everybody else during the 10 Commandments. He comes back to the rabbi at the end of the services and says, Rabbi, You wouldn't believe it. It worked like a charm. The moment we got to thou shalt not commit adultery, I remember why I left my bike. How do we translate this into an experiment? We went to UCLA and we asked about 500 students to try and recall the 10 Commandments. By the way, none of them could. It was interesting by itself. They made up all kind of new commandments. But after just trying to remember the 10 Commandments, we gave them the same task in which they could cheat. What happened? Nobody cheated. Now, it wasn't as if the people who remembered many commandments didn't cheat and the people who remembered few commandments cheated. Nobody cheated. That basically suggests that once you get people to consider their own moral code, we basically kind of reduce the flexibility by which we could justify all kinds of moral behavior.